how to check logs from my Docker container, and how to filter only last 200 lines from container logs. It's a very simple question. And here they are trying to assist your knowledge on Docker, especially on Docker commands and a few features of the same command. I would like to stress a point here that there are so many Docker commands for sure, and so many arguments also. You don't have to know all of them. But if you are using Docker on your day-to-day basis, then these kinds of commands is expected and are most commonly used, and interviewers will be aware that any DevOps engineer should be using these commands, and hence they are asking this question. So what is the answer for this question? The answer is pretty simple. The syntax for this command is nothing but Docker container logs and the container name. The container name can be web, for example, web app, doesn't matter. This depends on whatever the container name you will find. And if you want to filter this Docker logs output to only last 200 lines, then even that is very easy. All you have to do is pass an argument called as --tail and the lines, that is in this case 200 lines we need. And this will take care of only printing the last 200 lines that are required for debugging. This step is really helpful and also important. And we will discuss why also maybe in the next question. So how do you answer this question now? The command that I have used mostly to see the logs of my container is Docker container logs and container name. If you wish to see only the last 200 lines or 300 lines or 100 lines, then you can pass an argument called as --tail space 200, which will list only the last 200 lines of my container logs. This is how you can answer the question. So let us see the next question. The next question is also from the domain Docker, and it's a follow-up question from the previous question asked. And what is the question? What will happen to container logs if you restart the container? Will it be lost or not? Again, they are trying to test your experience in Docker. If you have just learned Docker, maybe then you have not seen this at all, and you might struggle to answer it. Well, good for you. You are in this training session with DevOps interview and answer. So I will explain this, but I would like to let you know where the question is coming from as a part of the interview. Hence, you can prepare in the similar direction. So what do you think the answer is? Well, let's see what it is. If you restart a container for any reason, you won't be losing any logs. Okay. All the logs will be still persisted inside your container /var/log or wherever your application writes. But maybe it will start appending it to a new file, maybe something like a new file when you restart. But the previous logs related to your application shall always persist if you just stop the container, start the container, or restart the container, doesn't matter which. But it is important to know also that if you delete a container, you will lose the logs. The logs will be lost if you delete the container. Please note. Why is it? Because the container will not persist it anywhere. And if you wish to persist this particular log, even though you deleted the container, You can use external persistent storage. Okay, external storage for it. Like either you can push the container logs to applications like Splunk, you know, or CloudTrail, etc. This way, this can be handled. Okay, how do we answer this question in the interview then? The answer is, if we start, stop, or restart the container for any reason, our logs will not be deleted. But when we run the docker logs command, we might not see the old logs. That depends on how our application handles log rotate. Meaning, if we restart the container, if the application also restarts, in this case, it might create a new file, but the previous file still exists. Also, I would like to mention that if the container itself is deleted for some reason, then the logs shall also be deleted as a part of container. If we have a use case in which we need to persist such kind of logs, then I would strongly suggest to use external log storage layer like Splunk or any other logging capacity tool so that we don't lose such logs. This is how you can answer this particular question in the interview. I would also like to mention that you will get follow-up questions based on how you answer a particular question in an interview. And this is an example of such a case. Meet you in the next video and let us continue our journey on practicing DevOps interview questions and answers. Thank you. You encounter a Docker image with a size 2.7 GB. What this can be a cause of concern? If yes, how would you tackle this? So basically what they're asking is, would this be a cause of concern for us? If yes, how would you tackle this problem in real time? So what do you guys think? Would this be a cause of concern? Would having a Docker image that is 2.5 GB a cause of concern? You might actually say that I need to look into the application, what it does. So it is justified, maybe yes. But in this case, let us understand that this might not be a critical application. This might be a very simple application. So 2.7 GB of Docker image size, is it okay to have or not okay to have? So how would you answer this question in the interview? You can pause this video here and try to attempt it. Now, let me explain a bit more details about Docker images itself. The bigger the Docker image, it would result in a longer build time. This is point number one. Now, either you really need this Docker image to be 2.7 GB or whatever size it is. The fact is, the bigger the Docker image, it is going to take a longer build time of the container. And Docker images, when you download it from Docker Hub, or let's say any other centralized repository, you might encounter certain download related errors also. And that could happen for many reasons. Maybe the size is too big. When it was downloading, it failed. Yeah, the internet connectivity is slow, etc. You might also encounter API rate limit issues. If you are downloading it from Docker Hub itself, you might encounter this API rate limit issues. And your application will also become bulkier when you want to debug and scale. So all of these are some of the facts that point us out that the Docker image size should not be larger. Okay, so as I shared with you earlier, this might be a very simple application. Let's say it's a Python Flask application. This doesn't need to be 2.5. If this is a simple Flask application, it doesn't need to be 2.7 GB at all. So what is the solution to reduce any Docker image size? First step is try to use Alpine images. Now, I'm pretty much sure you might have come across Alpine images when you are building your Docker image. So what is this Alpine image? It is also a base image. It is also called as a base image. So it doesn't have any unnecessary packages, and it is as light as possible to begin with. The second step is introduce multi-stage build. From the base image, you try to build up your image, and then you discard your previous image builds. This is known as multi-stage builds. This will help you to build your images in a proper way, and very importantly, will discard the previous images that were used to build it. It will only save your final image. And last point, and the most important point, is remove package binaries after installing them, and don't install packages that aren't necessary. The third point I would say here is the most important one, because a lot of people tend to install a bunch of packages which probably will never be used in the application. And once you install the packages, there is no need for us to have the binaries related to this package. Why would you need the binary also as a part of the package? There is no work for this binary anymore. Hence, you should delete them and also install only the packages that are required. I have another suggestion that I would like to mention here, which is not in the screen, is lock your package versions. So you have a package, let us say, Python request package, which we have already seen. So this request package, if you just download the latest, maybe you don't know if the latest will work always. Always try to lock this package to a version. This will also help you to make sure that you download that particular version and there is nothing else downloaded as a part of your package, which is unnecessary for you. Okay, so these are some information regarding the Docker images. So how would we answer this question in the interview? To begin with, I cannot just really say how to reduce it. If the application really requires this to be 2.7, then it is okay. But I would say that it might result in longer build time, errors when downloading the Docker image, and API rate limit with respect to our Docker Hub. And at the final, when we try to scale this application, we will feel that our application is bulkier. If this is a very simple image, then I would start rebuilding this image with first Alpine related images, which is base images. Using that, I would start doing the multi-stage builds of these Docker image, meaning I will try to build the required image using the base image and discard all the previous images during the build time. And third point is remove unnecessary package binaries that are present and remove packages that are not necessary for this application. This is how you can answer this particular question in the interview. What is the difference between Docker image and Docker layers? Okay, people who have worked with Docker or understand Docker, you might be wondering, what is the difference? They are literally two different things. Exactly. That is what we would like you to explain in this particular question. So go ahead and pause this video and see how you would answer this if this were to be asked in the interview. Before I explain anything here further, let me explain you that Docker layers are not a separate component. You cannot just have a Docker layer and use it. No, they are a subsidiary component of Docker image. Each layer in an image, each layer is an image by itself. They are generated when you run Docker container commands. That is, when you create the Docker build, you will be giving some commands, and these will be image layers. Each image layer stores a comparatively changes compared to the previous base image. And you can actually get this information by running, if you want, a Docker history command on the image. So if you use the Docker history command, then you will see that you will find the information about the image, all the Docker layers that have been used in the image will be shown in the Docker history command. To explain this a bit better, I have shared a small example of a Docker file. That is, we are using a Rails image, and then we are setting some environment and then an entry point. Very simple, but this is how the Docker layer looks like. There is a first layer, which is around about the image. There is a second layer when you run the env, and the third layer that gets created with the entry point. Combined after this, we will find an image. And when you run your container, this will be used to spin up the Docker container. Docker layers play an important role in terms of security or how it gets built, etc. And you should be aware of it. It is not a very critical component that you have to really look into because it happens in the shadows, but you should be aware of it and you should know how to tackle it if it is required for you to make some changes or reduce the image size, etc. Well then, how would you answer this question in the interview? Docker layer is basically an image itself. It gets created with every single command we write in the Docker file. And it is important to know that Docker layers are building blocks of the whole image. We don't need to access these layers independently when we create the container, but they are important for us to understand how the Docker image gets built and is used. Well, that is it for this video. Let us go to the next part or next section and see what and all new topics we get to learn as a part of DevOps interview preparation. Thank you. Explain CMD and entry point in Docker. Are these two same or different? I'm pretty much sure you're aware of both CMD and entry point in Docker. It is widely used when we create Docker images. The question is, are they different? If yes, how? If they are not different, then why do we need two of them? That is the intention or the idea behind this question. Let us try to see a bit about CMD, entry point, and then let us try to tackle this question if it were to be asked in the interview. So we are aware of what CMD is, like I shared with you, and we are also aware of what is entry point. I have given a small example here about CMD. We are downloading the latest image of Ubuntu, right? And then we are running echo command using CMD. This looks pretty standard, straightforward, and also it makes sense. The output of this will be that it is going to echo this one. So when the container gets spinned up, you can see this in the container logs or the container build time or the image build time also. What about entry point? Entry point is also similar. And here what happens is we are going to pass the same command. But the challenge here is what happens with entry point and CMD. The only difference is both of them can use different parts of shell. That is, we know there is bash, there is sh, etc. So there are chances that they might use different entry points, that is the different shells. Also, entry point is also used to run some .sh scripts, that is the shell scripts. And this output of the shell scripts can be passed to the CMD, or we can get the input from this particular CMD into our entry point. The best combination, of course, is using both of it in our Docker container, that is the Docker image. In this example, you can see we have an Ubuntu image, and as an entry point, we are mentioning echo, but the CMD is used to pass the output of the echo. That is, the output of this will be echo, double quotes. This is entry point, right? And this is how entry point functions. Well, I hope this is pretty clear. And if you are confused with this explanation, what I'm giving to you, then I would also suggest you that you can look into your Docker training content once again and try to revise this concept. because this concept requires a pretty much previous experience in building Docker container or having experience on writing entry point scripts, etc. Very well then, let us see how to tackle this question in the interview. CMD and entry point, both of it, can be used to run default commands, default Linux commands during the container build time. The difference between them is how they can be used to run shell scripts or what kind of kernels they will be using. Ideally, we can use both of it in the same Docker file, which is recommended in my opinion, or we should at least use one during our Docker build time to make sure that the Docker image has been built properly and the required services also functions accordingly. Very well. That is it for this video, my friends. Hope to see you in the next video and let us continue our journey in the DevOps interview preparation. Thank you. Given two different Docker files below, which one do you think will have a lesser file size when built? Kindly observe the question carefully and also try to understand the Docker files. We have Docker file 1, this is Docker file 1, and we have Docker file 2. So the question is, out of these two images, which image, let's say if this is image 1 and image 2, which image will have less size and why? If you carefully observe this particular Docker files, there is not much difference apart from just one particular parameter. And what is that parameter? This parameter is nothing but the 12 alpine that is getting used. Here it is not getting used. Does it mean this Docker file is wrong? Not really. If there is nothing mentioned, it is going to pick the latest, right? So yes. So here in the Docker file 2, it is picking the latest, and here in Docker file 1, it is picking the alpine. So which one will be, which image when will be lighter when it is built? The answer here is, the correct answer here is Docker file 1. That is, image 1 will have lesser size compared to image 2. This is how you can compare to image. Why is it? Because alpine images, as the name suggests here, they are used as what we call as lightweight images or operating systems. So they are very light. They only have packages that is required for functioning of this application, and hence that is all one should use. But it is not the case that it will be helpful in all given example. But if you are starting, let us say, a base image, and if you are starting something that is very simple and you want to build on top of it, then Alpine is the best image that you can use, or the best operating system that can be used. That will make sure that the image size is lesser. But this is just one of the factors. I hope you understood how to tackle this question. Now, how would you present this in the interview? This is how you can present this in the interview. Based on the images, based on the Docker files I see, there is one major difference I observe. In Docker file 1, we are using 12 Alpine, whereas in Docker file 2, we have not mentioned anything, which means we are pulling the latest. As the definition goes, if we pull an Alpine image, that is an Alpine operating system, it is always a lightweight operating system based on which we can build our Docker image further. Wherein if I pull the latest, it is not an Alpine, meaning it will be a bit heavier in terms of packages installed. Hence, the particular image, that is image number 2, will be heavier. Hence, the answer here is image 1 will be having a lesser size compared to image 2. Well, that is it for this video, my friends. I hope you understood some concepts in DevOps. Also, very importantly, how to answer them in the interview. Thank you.